Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Friendly Fire. Today, I'm bringing on Johnny Cochran, who ran for Alabama's 4th Congressional District. We're going to talk about his campaign and how things went. We're going to have a little retrospective. So, thank you for tuning in. And you know what? Let's get to it. All right. And here we are. I might have to work on that intro. I don't think I like it. It's like too short and too abrupt. But anyway, good morning, Johnny. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Up bright and early, kicking it, just getting into the day. So here we are. All right.
Absolutely.
So you ran for Alabama's 4th Congressional District. So overall, how did it go for you? Like, what were your
Well,
thoughts overall, I guess?
yeah, I definitely think it was a great experience.
Mhm.
And we can go into that, but I think the opportunity to go to a lot of different parts of the state that I hadn't yet had the opportunity to speak to people, have some people share some stories with me that I'll probably never forget for the rest of my life, in terms of, voters kind of opening up.
Mhm.
And I think the greatest achievement of not just our campaign, but Alabama as a state, the Libertarian Party had not been on the ballot for 20 some odd years, and we kind of had a surge of people who decided to run. I think it
Mhm.
was over 60 candidates,
I think
and
it
I
was like
think that
65, like
yep, yeah, and I
intense.
think that while we didn't maybe have the electoral success that maybe some of us had wished for,
Mhm.
I do think that the end result is that the Libertarian Party of Alabama has grown in membership and in
Good.
level of engagement. And so, certainly in my race, it was a three-way race. It's considered one of the reddest districts in the country, let alone in one of the reddest states. The guy, incumbent Adderhold, he's been there for now over 25 years.
Ooh.
He easily won re-election.
Mhm.
I only received about a little over 4,000 votes, so it was about 2.2%. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, so high level. I think after comparing notes with some of our other candidates, there were some folks that were running very active campaigns. There were some folks that were quote unquote paper candidates.
Mhm.
Alabama is one of only a handful of states that still allow for straight ticket party voting.
Okay.
So if you look at the numbers, um, the overall turnout was extremely poor. It was like 37, 38% voter turnout across the
Mhm.
state. And of those that turned out, over two-thirds simply voted straight party.
Mm.
So it's my earnest belief that I could have doubled my efforts
Mhm.
and raised twice as much money, or I think I could have not campaigned at all and not raised any money. And I'm fairly confident that I would have received probably the same share of the vote. And so
Mm.
I think that's a little disheartening. I had read news articles in the past that said Alabama is one of the states with the least, I don't know if the right term is active or engaged voters.
Mhm.
Um, but, I definitely am thankful that the Libertarian Party of Alabama reached out to me,
Mhm.
and I had the opportunity to run and experience what it's like to be on the ballot and campaign throughout the district.
Right. So let's take a look at some of those numbers. And what we're going to do here is take a peek, but we're not here to trash somebody and be like, oh, look how terribly you did. Like I tell the other candidates, I said, let's take a look at them and let's talk about what we're seeing here so that the next person, whether it's you or someone else that comes along and wants to challenge, say Robert Adderholt, who has been in, like you said, for 25 years, that next person maybe has a little bit better chance. And so 2.2 maybe ends up being 4.4 or what have you, right? Like just keep increasing. Or, you know, like maybe it's the, you know, figuring out how to strategy to deal with the fact that 2/3 of the people were voting straight down ballot ticket. And because of that, they may not even seen your name, right? And so maybe that's part of it. There's any number of things that can go in it, but we can't get better if we don't have these conversations. So we're
Yeah.
looking here, and he's got 84%. The Democrat. So I find it kind of interesting that the Democrats even ran somebody in the reddest district in the reddest state, because a lot of times they won't.
Yeah, it's interesting. He has run unopposed in the past. Now, Rick Neighbors was his opponent in 2020. And so he ran again and actually had a number of interactions with Rick Neighbors, unlike Adderholt, who basically did not even acknowledge that there was a two opponents in the race. He pretty
Mhm.
much didn't mention us at all. And I think I'm happy to take this conversation any which way you'd like. I think one of the takeaways for me personally is I know that across the Libertarian Party, at an maybe a conversation that's happening across all states is, where do we think we can have the most success? And
Mhm.
at least in terms of Alabama, I think that because we have that straight party ticket voting, I had voters who would come out of the polling location, because I was campaigning, whatever the legal required feet away from the polling location on election day, and people would come up to me and say, "Hey, I voted for you," and I
Mhm.
said, "Hey, thank you so much. I
Right.
really appreciate that. Did you bubble in my name?" And they said, "No, I bubbled Republican," and I said, "Well, then you didn't vote for me." And so, I think having
Were they
knocked on a lot,
surprised?
you know,
Or were
surprised
people
and
just telling you
embarrassed.
what? Okay, so they weren't just telling you what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the most interesting thing is, in my experience, when I would talk to people and I knocked on some doors, and the other big thing I did is, whether it was $100 or $200, I would basically pay for a quote unquote vendor's table at like a community festival. So like Franklin County has a watermelon festival. Red Bay has Founders Fest, and so just like people are, selling their arts and crafts, I just had a table out handing out literature and trying to talk to people, talk to
Mhm.
voters. And for the most part, even though this incumbent has been there for 25 plus years, most people could not name him by name. And, it wasn't so much that they were voting for him. It's just that, I guess, the way we're conditioned growing up in the society, it's red team, blue team. And I just know that I'm with the red team.
Right.
And when you actually talk to people who knew who he was, that most of them can't stand him. And so, it's kind of one of those weird scenarios. So, in my opinion, this broader libertarian conversation, you know, um, I think when you're running for these federal offices, I think I would agree with those that are putting forth the idea that it's really important to try to get out the message and to
Mhm.
try to lead people to liberty. But I think from a strategic point of view, those that are running for the more local offices, I think that's where strategically, whether it was myself or if I was giving advice to others, where would you have the highest ROI? It would be for those mayors, city councils,
Mhm.
um, offices like that, because I could be wrong, but just based on my experience, it was really hard for people to not vote the way they've always voted for those federal offices.
Right. Okay. So, and the it sounds to me like the way we've always done it is really what got you, not so much people preferred the other candidate. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? L-
Well,
Like
you know,
you might have still not won, but you might have gotten higher numbers. Like the reason that you have the numbers you have is not quite, oh, I actually preferred the Republican candidate. It's more like I'm doing what I've always done. I go in there, I just vote Republican, and I get everybody.
In my opinion, when I would canvass neighborhoods that I knew to be overwhelmingly Republican neighborhoods, and I would talk to Republican voters, I would ask them if they knew who their congressperson was.
Hmm.
And most of them did not. And so I would have kind of like a conversation tree I would take people through, right? Because most people, um, I'm a professional salesperson. People don't like to be sold; they like to buy, right? So I'm not trying to sell them, "Hey, vote for me, become a libertarian, convert this instant." It's more or less trying to take them down a path where they come to their own conclusion, like, "Oh, maybe I should consider this." And so,
Hmm.
hey, do you agree with term limits? Well, most Republican voters say yes. Say, okay, do you realize that the incumbent's been there for 25 years? Kind of a long time, right? Yeah, that is kind of a long time. All right. Do you realize that the national debt has 6x'd over the last 25 years, and he has voted overwhelmingly for most of that spending, whether it was Iraq and Afghanistan or whether it was, things like Obama's cash for clunkers, so he's kind of a big government Republican. And
Hmm.
so a lot of them were like, huh, I didn't realize that. I just, I vote Republican and, because they're supposed to be the limited governments,
Hmm. Hmm.
fiscally responsible type. And so um, I just think that there's a great swath of voters who probably turn on Fox News or MSNBC, and they have it on all day at the house, and they're just kind of constantly being bombarded by
Hmm.
messaging. And I think it just soaks in over years, and so people have an identity that they identify with one team or the other, and I think they're less invested in um, their specific congressperson versus being on that team. Because I think maybe in our last conversation I kind of shared with you that I grew up in a Republican household.
Hmm.
Certainly, I
Same.
was involved in Republican politics up until uh, here a couple of years ago. And in my opinion, if you talk to a Republican voter and ask them, can you tell me five Republican elected officials in either the Senate and or the House that you really like? Most of them can't. Most of them can't stand the Republicans that are elected. It's just
Hmm.
that they hold their nose and vote for them because they don't want their taxes raised, and their theory is that's what the blue team's going to do to me. When in reality, you and I both know that when the Republicans have power, they never shrink government. They might marginally tinker with the tax rates, but they don't reduce spending. So the country gets in worse, fiscal footing. And so I really do believe that, focusing more local for the Libertarian Party makes a lot of sense. And certainly that is something that I'm going to be advocating for when the Libertarians of Alabama hold their state convention, which is coming up here in about a month.
Mm, okay. It sounds to me like I agree with the local because it seems like what we need to get around is like habit, um, what people are used to, and then also maybe fears, that people have ingrained in them over the years, and in fears that it's the other team that's going to do all these bad things to them. And my team, well, they might do some bad things, but they're going to keep the other team from doing worse things. Right.
Mm,
And so I think you're right in that we need to really focus on local races simply because that allows us to have more, more direct conversation about the person that's running, if you're the candidate, of course, then what you have to offer. And I think that kind of helps break through that barrier a little bit, because if somebody's running for mayor, there's not national news talking about, oh, what this mayor I mean, there might be a little bit, but there's not a lot, right? Like it's going to be relatively limited, and most of it's probably going to be related to mayors in huge cities like, say, New York and Los Angeles and stuff like Chicago. Those are going to be the mayors that we tend to hear about nationally. But you're not going to hear a whole lot about the mayor here in Jacksonville nationally. So it makes sense to run a campaign there, and try to. I mean, you still got to. I mean, don't get me wrong. We have elections coming up here on March 21st for our city council and for our mayoral race,
Mm-hmm.
and there's plenty of fight to be had, right? Don't I mean I just saw this morning that in one at-large seat is actually suing another at-large seat over residency, saying, hey, you weren't a resident, when you filed, so it's starting to pick up here, but it's at least local, right? And it's, so when you talk to people and you're like, hey, do you know that so and so has been in office for 2 terms now or whatever, like people are going to be more familiar with that information.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think you know, the local route I think makes sense. So, as a state party apparatus, when we're deciding and trying to recruit candidates and where
Hmm.
do we fit people, I think the people that are interested in running the most active campaigns, it makes sense to focus that on the local level. And then, perhaps those that are well versed in the philosophy, um, and are good speakers, have them run for those more, whether it's governor, U.S. Senate, those type of
Hmm.
positions, and hopefully be able to spread that message more effectively. I think in Alabama, it's a very uphill battle, because it is such a red state, and I think that it's going to be a long slog for the Libertarian Party to be able to uh, you know, perhaps achieve electoral success. So a lot of what I'd like to discuss at the upcoming state convention is, where are the issues that we can really advance. So one of the
Hmm.
ones I'm particularly excited about is defend the guard. Here in
Right.
Alabama, it's a very red state, very pro-military,
Hmm.
support the troops type of sentiment across across party lines all across the state. And so to me, that would be something where I think the Libertarian Party could try to advance a particular single issue, and find some sort of incumbent state legislator that might be willing to take on that cause, because I think
Hmm.
that if you present that not as, hey, I'm a libertarian, I want to tell you a libertarian idea, but present it as, you know, why do we want whoever is the president of the United States, who might be of the party you don't support, to be able to send our neighbors and our sons and daughters over to military conflict zones without a declaration of war, which we haven't had
Right.
since World War II. And so I think there are issues like that I'd like to focus on, to try to achieve liberty, in whatever kind of incremental fashion that we can.
Right. Got it. Okay, so let me ask you a couple questions here. Um, what was the biggest challenge of your campaign? Like, more than just okay, the down ballot access. I'm sorry, not down ballot, the down ballot voting, and then some of those other things that we already talked about. But like specifically to you when you were out on the campaign trail, what was the biggest challenge that you faced?
Yeah, I think, um, probably time. And
Hmm.
what I mean by that is, I'm full time employed. I have a family with two small children. I definitely think that, if you were going to run a campaign for U.S. Congress, it literally could be its own full time job.
Mm,
And so, I'm doing what I can on the weekends,
right.
without trying to put too much strain on my family. And then during the week, doing podcasts and interviews. And just that, I think if you are running for that federal, um, seat, I definitely think it's a very large time commitment.
Hmm.
And so, you know, I live, if you look at that very gerrymandered congressional district map, I live in the very southwestern tip of the district, and so it would take me 2.5 hours one
Mm,
way to get to the northeastern part of the district. And so, you know, geographically, it was just a very difficult territory to manage. So, I think if you are interested in running for that federal office, and I was going, I wasn't playing just to play. I was trying
right,
my best to earn the highest amount of votes possible. Just realize that it is an enormous time commitment
right.
if you are going to run a more active campaign.
Gotcha. So, would it have been helped if you had had more volunteers, or would you still have a significant problem? Like, I need to be here, and I can't, I can't always travel 5 hours in a day just to
Mm.
go to, the more northern part of my district.
Yeah, I mean, more campaigns, more volunteers would have been great. Now, I had a couple, and
Hmm.
those that I had did a tremendous amount of work for me, and I really do appreciate them.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the things that, in retrospect, we're having a conversation as a state party, which is it was fantastic that we had 65 candidates, but at the
Right.
same time, if those are our most engaged members in the state party apparatus, then we were kind of lacking on the support level for them.
Hmm.
I think having so many candidates again allowed us to grow the party, allowed us to uh, get people more engaged. I certainly think in the future, it might be more strategic to figure out, again, what are the races that we can have the most impact, and
Hmm.
possibly run fewer candidates unless our party has grown so much that we have both enough people for candidates and also enough people to be a support structure for them.
Right. Do you think so? What I'm hearing is that 65 candidates ran and you actually ended up growing the party. Do you think that could happen a second time in a row where the Libertarian Party of Alabama runs a huge list of people and then grows the party a little bit more? Or do you think it would end up being a quick diminishing return?
Well, I think we're going to find out here in a month's time. We're going to have the state party convention. I attended the one last year, so I'm
Hmm.
very interested to see what is the attendance rate comparing the 2 years. I think the most challenging thing about our state is we have the most restrictive ballot access laws in the country.
Oh.
And so, in order to maintain ballot access, which the party fought so hard to get,
Hmm.
one of our statewide candidates had to achieve, I think, a 20% threshold, and none of them did
Oh,
that.
wow. Wow.
Um,
20%.
and I think,
That's rough.
yeah, the most interesting race that that I was interested to see how the results shaked out was lieutenant governor, because there was no Democrat in
Hmm.
that lieutenant governor race. And so, if you look at the numbers, and again, I'm not saying that the Libertarian Party deserves votes. But again, just looking straight at the numbers and the quantities, you can
Hmm.
tell compared to the three-way governor race that while our lieutenant governor candidate got a great number of votes, there is a huge drop off in the quantity of people who voted in that election. And so, what that
Mm.
tells me is there was about 200,000 Democrat voters who voted straight party Democrat, which means that they did not even vote in that lieutenant governor's race. And again, I'm not saying, well, we're not the Republicans, so you should have voted for Libertarians. But I don't know if there was enough you know awareness level across voters in the state that if you vote straight party and your party doesn't have anyone in that race, then you're not voting in that race. And maybe that's a conscious decision, and I can respect that, but I do suspect that a great deal of that 200,000 Democrat voters that voted straight party ticket did not realize they were not voting in half of the elections.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. That down ballot ticket is killing you guys
Yeah, so I
because we don't have that
certainly.
here in Florida.
Mm. Yeah, so certainly, there is a lot of discussions going on within the state party, and there are things that I'm doing to specifically things. I'm trying to grow my affiliate, so I started my county affiliate.
Oh, good.
We had two last year. We've doubled to four, and I think I'm pretty
Hmm.
close to having a fifth. And
Nice.
so to be able to grow our county affiliate and really start having conversations about how do we advance liberty here at the local level, I think is really important. And at the same time, I'm also collecting signatures again to petition the state to allow the state party access. And so, um, whether it's local community events, looking
Hmm.
at that calendar and trying to budget time to attend those events and collect signatures.
Right.
I spoke to my local Rotary Club. Now, Rotary, they don't want you to get super political. So I basically just had a conversation about I got recruited to run by the Libertarian Party and just talking about my experience running.
Hmm.
And so it was kind of not specifically getting into too much partisan talk, but by the end of that conversation, in a room of voters that were older than um, look, I got 2/3 of them to sign that petition at the end of that talk.
That's
And
good.
so, things like that is kind of what I'm focused on. Again, to
And
give
this was
the
after
party
the
an opportunity.
election?
This is after the election.
Okay, okay, so you're still working it.
Yeah, the work doesn't stop.
Right.
And I think,
Good for you.
yeah. Well, I had, to be honest with you, I did have three people reach out to me after the election that were Republican voters that asked, will you consider changing parties and running in a Republican primary against Adderholt? And I was kind of flattered that those unsolicited asks came my way. But, I kind of explained to them that it's my opinion that the Republican Party is broken, and that's part of what led me to join the Libertarian Party. I don't believe that, while they use sometimes rhetoric of limited
Mhm.
government, of less taxes, of less spending, it's never materialized in the 38 years I've been on this earth. And so,
Right.
um, I always tell people I don't agree with Donald J. Trump on much, but I would have to agree that he is kind of a force of nature, right?
Mhm.
And so if he's elected as the top Republican in the country, and even he can't, bring the Congress to heel to whatever his vision is, I think it's very unlikely that, a liberty-minded Republican, if they were to win, they still would not be able to enact the types of necessary changes our country needs um, in order to have a more peaceful and prosperous society. And I think that vehicle is the Libertarian Party. I realize it's going to be more difficult, but I think the two parties are ultimately corrupted
Right.
at the very top, and no real substantive change will occur through either of those vehicles for the betterment of individuals.
Right. No, I think that's a good point to bring up and say, "Hey, look, you had your shot at a guy who was supposed to not be the establishment, and he was the top guy in your party." Disregarding, we all know that the president has a limited amount of actual power, but he was the top guy in your party, and look what he still wasn't able to accomplish a lot of what he wanted to, and a lot of what the anti-establishment Republicans wanted to see.
Hmm.
So, including getting elected a second time. So, okay. Flip side of that question, then, what happened? What was the biggest success of your campaign? Just the thing that you're like, man, if I ran again, I hope that this is another, this is I get the same experience.
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned at the top of our conversation that I did have people share with me uh, very personal stories.
Hmm.
And, sometimes you hear a story and it just really, makes you stop and think. And I'm thinking of one lady in particular who talked about her son going off to Afghanistan
Right.
and served in Afghanistan. And that when he came back, she described that, the sparkle in his eye was gone and that
Mm.
he really struggled mentally and, you know, wanted help. Uh, she encouraged him to go and seek out that medical help. Again, whether or not he sought it out, I'm not sure, but ultimately ended up taking his own life. And I
Oh,
think
just
that when you hear stories like that, it goes from more of the you know, I'm reading libertarian books and trying to understand the philosophy better and kind of understanding that yes, it is not right to engage in these military conflicts around the world. But then when you go and actually speak to someone who's been affected by that, and they're not steeped in the philosophy, they're just sharing with you that they lost their child because they went over to a war zone again that was not declared, probably had to do things that conflicted with their conscience, and that weighed on them when they got back to such a degree that they felt like the only way out they had was to take their own life. And so when I hear stories like that, it further strengthens my resolve that um, it is not enough to just get on Twitter and retweet all my favorite libertarian personalities. That conversations do need to be had with
mhm,
people. And again, the strategy I take is I don't necessarily want to convert them to be a libertarian on day one. I want to
right.
understand what's most important to them. And
Mhm,
I want to try to ask questions that might just put the smallest chip or dent in their worldview, based on what's most important to them. I feel like you have to lead people to liberty. You can't forcefully convert people. And so I think that the greatest experience of my campaign was hearing very powerful stories like that. And I think that if I could have more of those conversations and just plant the seed of liberty in people's
mhm.
minds, that again, um, hopefully that would bear fruit at some point in the future, whether it's them changing their vote, whether it's them having conversations with their friends and family. um, so
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. And I tell people this all the time. I'm like, libertarians, get out and talk to people. Don't try to convert them. Don't try to, don't give. Yeah, it's nice to say taxation is theft and all of our other slogans, but at the end of the day, talk to people and just hear where they are. And it's okay that they're going to disagree with you because they disagree with you now, and after you're done talking with them, they will probably still disagree with you. And that's okay, because what we want to, like you said, we want to plant that seed of liberty so that the next time maybe they talk to Johnny, or maybe the person that comes after Johnny, that seed is watered a little bit, right? And you just kind of keep watering that seed, and eventually, um, even if they don't turn to libertarianism, maybe they start voting libertarian more often. Maybe they get away from the down ballot voting and they say, well, you know what? I'm a Republican, but man, there's a couple libertarians I really want to vote for. Right. And I think that's going to happen because of these kind of conversations, and not just with candidates, with just regular everyday libertarians going out and talking to people, about the message of liberty.
yeah, and we're here at the local level again with our county affiliate. We're discussing ways of sometimes it's hard to start something brand new, like
Hmm.
a community event. But what are the already existing events
Hmm.
that we as a county affiliate could participate in? So whether it's county chili cook off,
Hmm.
around Christmas time, they put up trees, across Christmas trees across the plaza, and they're all decorated by different organizations. Could we have a libertarian party of Tuscaloosa County Christmas tree and maybe have
Hmm.
liberty themed Christmas ornaments on it? Just things that can we engage in the community in a variety of different ways to kind of raise awareness, and like
Hmm.
you said, open the possibility of people perhaps changing their voting patterns.
Right. Okay, final question. What's in store for you now? We kind of already heard that you are working, you've been out to the Rotary Club and you've talking to them. You're looking forward to going to convention. You are starting an affiliate. You've got about 5 people. So are you planning on running for office again in the future?
I think the short answer is probably yes.
Hmm.
I had always wanted to run for office, but I thought about doing it at a much later stage in my life, just because of
Mhm.
the age of my kids. I do have to travel some for my work, and so it becomes very difficult to be gone part of the week out of state for work, and then come right back to home
Mm.
and
Right.
say, okay, well now I need to, I need to go to a campaign event, 2 hours away. So I think the short answer is yes. The longer answer is I'm not sure when.
Okay.
I had several people reach out to me and ask if I would consider running for positions within the state party apparatus. I'm not opposed to that either, but also thinking about that down the road. Um, I have done my best to recruit new people into the party and talk to those that are already engaged. And I do believe that there are a strong set of people who plan to run for various positions within the state
Mhm.
party. So again, very much looking forward to the state convention, and I'm just going to keep a lot of my focus on you know my local county affiliate, trying to grow it, trying to have conversations to raise awareness, and you'll see where that takes us.
Gotcha. All right, awesome. Well, it's been great having you on. We're gonna kind of wind things down and close it up here. I think I personally found this conversation to be very valuable, and I think there's a lot. In fact, I was as we were talking, or as you were talking, I was like, man, this is like a good little clip just to clip out and throw on Twitter, so that people can see and say like, oh, you know what, that is a good idea. So I'll definitely be, snipping some things out of this to kind of float those around. And I'm glad that you ran, and I'm glad that you had the experience that you had, and that it didn't sour you on continuing your work in the future. I know it can be pretty frustrating, but that's we're here to try to pave the way for those that come behind us, even if it's us again. So, any final words for people?
Well, I'll just say this to kind of continue on that thought, which is one of the people who's joined our county affiliate, um, like myself, was a former Republican, and he's just so disgusted with
Mhm.
Republican politics, and had a conversation with him and just started inviting him to our county affiliate meetings. Just come by, talk, shoot the breeze. And every time he would come to one of these conversations, he said he would kind of, I'm not saying I'm going to join the Libertarian Party, but just and so that happened for a couple meetings, and at our January meeting, he said, "Okay, I'm ready to join." And I invited him to come to the state convention so he can kind of meet, meet network more. And so I would just say to anyone who's listening or watching to this is that you should try to invite people, even if they're maybe not, 100% ingrained in the philosophy,
Mhm.
to your meetings. Find out what their passions are, what their frustrations are, and perhaps start to ask those questions that lead them to make their own conclusion that liberty is the way. And
Right.
eventually, some of them are going to come around, and then they're going to be right there in the trenches with you.
Awesome. All right. Well, hang backstage for just a moment. I'm going to close the show, and then we'll chat for a moment or two afterwards. So hold on for just a second there, sir. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. It's my pleasure to bring on candidates that are libertarian candidates only. This show is only for libertarian candidates, but it's my pleasure to bring them on, whether we're talking about their current run or whether they're talking about their previous run, because I believe this is how we get better and we lay the groundwork for others to come behind us and get more votes and get more people into the Libertarian Party. So with that, please join me on Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings at 7:30 a.m. nice and early so that we can talk to candidates. I bring on candidates every week. I will also be bringing on in the future some libertarian candidates for the Libertarian Party of Florida for some inter-party um, candidates that are running for party positions. So if you're interested in that, they'll be on this show as well. But until then, be safe and guard your liberty. Thanks for joining.